Linus Riddle. I am a student at Gold Lake High School, and this is for my video game development class. Um, Last week, in the junior programming pathway on Unity Learn, I worked through the basic gameplay branch. Um, and that's where I did a bunch of stuff like um, I had the Animal Stampede, where you're the farmer and you throw food at the animals before they get to you. And if they get to the end of the screen, then you lose. And um, worked a lot with coding the collisions of everything, like the food and the animals, and your player with the batteries on the screen. Um, and then I did the fetch challenge, and that's mostly what I did last week. I didn't show it in the vlog, I don't think, but I worked through oh, uh, this 3.1 Jump Force um, last week as well, which controlled the way that the businessman was jumping in this city place, like how high and everything. No, I'll show you that. So here's my. I guess I'll show this off first. I worked through the sound effects, and then I've gone through most of the gameplay mechanics as well. Insider effects, I made it so that in this one, I made it so that like the background and objects would move toward the player properly, and the background would repeat in the correct way. And I added a bunch of particles and effects, and I also added music in here, as well as sound effects for jumping and hitting an object. And then I did the lab here for player control, which I'll show you also. This is my own little creation of what I've been working on through this thing. And I did most of a challenge um, as well. So here you can see that I'm an attached head on my GitHub, and I have checked out the commit for the next one I haven't done. So I'll load stuff and show you it. So here I have my scene with the business guy, and I have the spawn manager set up to spawn obstacles. I'll play it and see where we're at and everything. So the character here you can see is pretty motionless and has no real animation, and when I run into an obstacle, I'm just kind of stopped on it. I can still jump and everything, but the background stops moving and everything. So the how I made the background move was I used a script here that when I have this repeat background and I have this move left, I apply the move left to the obstacle and the background. So once it loads up, I'll show you that code. So here you can see that I have this code. This destroys the object when it gets too far off screen. So like when the position is less than -15 here. And that's specifically for the obstacle to anything with the obstacle tag. So for example, if I was to put the obstacle tag on the background, then it would destroy the background as it goes off screen. And that's based on like the player. So also like it finds the player anyway in the script as well. And I also have the spawn manager here. It is linked up to the boxes that spawn in front of you. And it spawns them 25 units in front of your player, and then stops spawning them if you have a game over, which I made it send when you touch a box. Okay, this is a couple commits ahead, but in this one I added sound effects to jumping and a basic track in the background. I also added, and in the previous commit, I added animations to everything. So you can see that there are particle effects as well on the player. When I click on them, it plays. So this will play as you're running, and then this that explosion particle you saw um, is what happens when you touch a box. Um, so you can see that that plays, and I'll play the game and show you. Sometimes it takes a minute to actually load up the game, so you can hear us see that. So here I was working in the animator, and I have I this is how you can see all the little animations of this guy running, um, and he can do the running jump from the run. He's never idle because he's always running. And then I also have the sounds connected to the player, so audio source. This is all this stuff. I could make the volume higher or lower for everything. Um, so the audio source is connected to it. And that's what this little box down here is. So that's mostly it for that specific game. I did the challenge, or tried to do most of the challenge. I won't really show it off because some of it stopped working. Like it was working initially, but then it stopped, and I don't know why exactly. Um, but I'll show you my commit that show you my lab that I did. This is what I did with my own. Like I did this after the rest of the branch, just to like basically show everything I've been doing, and utilize it all in my own area. So here I'll open the scene um, for the um, for what I got here. Um, this is for the lab. I'll show you in a second. Okay, so here I have all this for my own lab. I didn't animate anything because my character that I used was just a sphere, so it rolls, and that's about it. Um, but I added physical boundaries rather than like stopping you from moving through invisible ones. Um, and this is basically what I'll be doing in the next unit, or what I'll be showing off. But um, my character moves when I press WASD, and I'll show you the code for that. So here you can see my code, and all it is for the player is just I added a velocity. I added this game over thing that I didn't end up using just yet, or I mean I did, but there is no way to lose in my game. Um, so here you can just see that you can move around. I was just demonstrating the movement in this lab, um, but you can see that it pushes you when you press different keys. Um, so since the camera's facing down, back would be down. When you press S, it does that if the game over is false, and it adds some acceleration to the ball. There's a better way to do this, because in my game you have to spam the key to move in that direction because you're just adding speed rather than pushing it really. But that's how I did it in this one, and I'll show you a better way to do it in the next branch. So here I was working on the gameplay mechanics. I've nearly finished this up. The lab and the quiz are the only things I have left to do. I've done most of the lab. I could probably even just check it off, but I want to do a little bit more for the enemies that I'll show off. So here I have my gameplay mechanics branch, and I'll load up the first one on there. I'll load up the second one because it's a little bit more representative of what I was doing there. Can't really see the progress in the first one. So here's my scene for the gameplay mechanics, the primary part of it anyway. Um, so this is where I added the ball. and some enemies and everything. That's the moon. The enemies look pretty similar, honestly. Um, but so you can see when I play the game that I am there's an enemy that spawns in, and I can rotate the camera and move forward in the direction wherever the camera is facing that way. The enemy is pretty slow and just went straight off the edge. Doesn't respond yet. Um, you can see that I applied a texture to this ball. And that's why it's changing colors and everything. It's just based on how close you are. That's not actually coded or anything. But I could show you some scripts of how everything's working. For my player controller, I have a similar thing to what I was doing, but it's just getting the vertical input. I can't move left to right because the AD, which are the left to right controls, just rotate the camera left to right, and I just move forward and backward. So it's taking the vertical input, so W and S, or the up and down arrow keys, whatever you use it, and then adding a force and moving forward, as it says here, with whatever speed you apply to it. It's public, so I could change it at the inspector. And it gets the rigid body and then finds the focal point. So the focal point is what I used here. I'll show you here. So it's right in the center of the island. So the camera is actually set up right here too, but the camera finds the focal point and rotates based on the inputs of A&D around the focal point. It's always pointing at this point right in the center of the island. That's why when I play it, the camera isn't just like spinning off into itself. It's rotating around the center, not like this, because that's generally what I would do. Or if I wanted to rotate, it wouldn't do like that. So the focal point is a way to get it to rotate around an object. You can see that the enemy isn't actually in the hierarchy. It only spawns when that's due to the spawn manager. It just spawns when the wave starts. So you can see that this instantates the enemy, and this finds a random range to spawn it. This enemy doesn't spawn in the same spot, so the position of the Z and X axis are random in between the range of the island. If it was just if I didn't really have a range, that it would just spawn in one spot every time. And when I get to more enemies, that could be an issue, because if they're spawning in the same spot, that could cause some errors. So I'll show you my waves of enemies that I was using next in the next part of this. And again, this is going off the UP Learn branch, so all these are everywhere, and I have all these into my product management on Trello. But here I was in my gameplay mechanics, and then I added a power up as well, and then some waves of enemies in the next branch. I'll show you both at the same time, I guess. So here I have the everything set up again. The power up indicator wasn't really working super well. It's supposed to be like a balloon. When I enable it, you can see it. For some reason, it just wasn't spawning when I attached it to it. It should have been. I followed everything to the code, and I couldn't figure it out. I even did research online, and I just couldn't figure it out. But that was supposed to appear on top of the player when they get a power up, and you can see that when I load the game, that the power up will show up. So that's the potion, and there's an enemy. So the enemy will be knocked back more when I touch them while holding the power up, and they also spawn in increasing numbers for each time that they all fall off the map. So how the code works is when the enemies are like, the enemy count is 0, then the next wave spawns. The wave number increases, and based on the wave number, that's how many things it spawn. That's why it spawns 1 in the first one, because that's wave 1, and then on the next one, wave 2, once all of them fall, then it'll spawn two enemies in that one. How the power-ups works is that you have a force. Let me see if I can pull up the script. So on the player controller, when you touch the power-up, countdown starts for 7 seconds, and then it disables the power-up after then. That's what this is. And then it makes it falls, like the active power-up. And this is when you touch the enemy with a power-up, then the force is like increased that you hit the enemy with. So that's why they were going flying back when I hit the power-up. Also, a new power-up spawns every wave. I think you probably saw that. And so then I did a lab for this one as well. I won't save, but I could show you that in a second. Let me discard this because again, some changes get made every time you boot up the thing, regardless of if I did anything to the actual code or scene. It will always make a change in the GitHub. Oh, I also did the challenge 4, which was another one that was not working exactly as intended, because the enemies were moving, and I even put the same code that I did for the first one, where the enemies would follow after you like that, into this, and the enemies just weren't moving, and I wasn't sure why. And I could show you some issues that I was having with that, and all the errors that were in this challenge. So here in the scene, you can see that there is the soccer ball, and then this is your player, and your camera follows the player behind them, which is a little different from how it worked before. So in this one, when I boot it up, initially, you can bump that around, and power-ups will spawn sometimes. And when you get the power-up, it works just as it did in the last one. It hits the enemy back further, and the indicator works as well for some reason, but not my own. So when they get knocked with the thing, it spawns a new wave, which should increase by 1 per wave. So here's the power-up. You can see that the indicator's on, and when I hit them, then 2 will spawn this time. And again, it should be the enemies should be moving towards my own goal, but the reason that I wasn't able to do that well was because you can't apply an object to the prefab because the enemies aren't being spawned in at all times. So I just put this enemy down as an example for the most part, just to show that you can't. But for the enemy thing, I have the player goal, which is what they're supposed to go to, and they have this variable assigned to the what they're finding and going towards, just like the player in the last one. They were finding the player and then looking in that direction and moving that way. But in this one, it's finding this object, and that's what it's trying to find here. But for some reason it wasn't working. I tried to make this public, so I could just drag it from here to there, but it wasn't working, because I can't apply this to a prefab. So if all the enemies were in there initially, then yes, I could apply it to that, but I can't. Okay, so that's mostly what I've been doing for this last week. And if you want to check out the Unity Learn pathways and everything, you can. It's pretty good for learning all this stuff. I like this one. Got fun to code everything. And next week I'll show you the lab and the quiz. I mean, I won't show you the quiz, but and then I'll be working through the user interface and everything. next week. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.